I've been told I should introduce myself and also the speaker. I'm Anthony Butler and I teach politics at UCT, and I also write a newspaper column, and I'm an amateur biographer. And the person we're talking to today, whose book we're celebrating, this book, The Outsider, is Prince Mashele, and he's more of a professional than me in each of these roles. So Prince is also a political scientist. He's an author of books with very dramatic titles, including The Fall of the ANC, which perhaps Prince got ahead of himself there, and also Death of Our Society. So this is this your third or your fourth book, Prince? Your third book. Prince is also a newspaper columnist for a whole range of publications, including the ones I've read most often in the Swayton, but also in Sunday Times and Business Day. And he's worked for think tanks, and indeed created a think tank himself, or a consultancy, and it has worked as a consultant for major banks and businesses. And now he's also a biographer. And so today I'm going to be asking Prince a few questions about his book on Herman Mashaba. And then we'll leave plenty of time at the end for you to ask Prince your own questions. So, Prince, maybe we should start with the obvious question. Why did you decide to write a book about Herman Mashaba?
Thanks, Anthony. Don't believe what he said about himself. He's actually the more experienced biographer. I'm trying to follow in his footsteps. Look, around 2014, this book, I co-authored this book with Professor Mzuki Siko. And the title, as you can see, says The Fall of the ANC, What Next? So after writing it, we were sure and very happy that we had murdered the ANC. It was dead. But we were not quite sure about the what next question, which spoke to the future of South African politics. So the ANC is dead, it has fallen. What next politically? That was our dilemma. And we knew that we did not answer that question. And it kept on troubling me. Around 2015, 2016, 2017, as I entertained this question, I observed and saw a phenomenon in Western Europe. And it went to America. These are outsiders, chaps who were never in politics, they were never raised or trained in a political party. They decide one day, one is a comedian or a businessman in Ukraine, and was a blogger in Italy. In fact, a friend of mine were teaching together at the University of Pretoria, even became a minister, Lorenzo Fiormont, of higher education. Out of nowhere, complete outsiders who decide to wake up and storm the political theater and take over. Trump did the same in the US. Then I said to myself, could it be that the future of South African politics will move in that direction, where we'll get to a point where you get an outsider who come from not political parties and take over? Around 2017, Herman Mashaba was mayor of Johannesburg. I had dismissed him publicly, and he knows that. As a novice and this guy who doesn't know anything about politics. But around 2017, I saw a shift in the way in which he was perceived publicly. That people were beginning to take him seriously. And I thought, maybe this man is going to rise and will go far in the DA. I was thinking of him in the DA at the time. Remember, there was no action SA, nothing of that sort. Then I said, maybe I should know this fellow better. And then I read his autobiography, Black Like You, which in the main is about what he did in business. And there's another one, Capitalist Crusader, which I found unstructured and all over. It didn't tell me anything about him. And I said, okay, why don't I try and write a book about this guy? And I approached him. I looked for his numbers. I didn't have his cell number. A friend of mine who worked in Johannesburg municipality, I said, look, find me Herman Mashaba's cell number. And he did. One Sunday, I'm sitting at a car wash. I drop him a WhatsApp and say, dear Mr. Mashaba, my name is Prince Mashele. I have an idea of a book I would like to discuss with you. And he responded 10 minutes later. He says, come. And then there were 3 meetings after that. Went to his house. We agreed on the terms. This is my book, it's not yours. I have a final word. And that's it. That's how it happened. So I was investigating the phenomenon of outsiders taking over the political storms. Yeah.
Wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit about Mashaba's early life? Because we tend to know very little about him, about his background, his education, his family, and so on.
Sure. And obviously, you know, it's all in the book. Look, when I grew up in Mpumalanga, around Hazy View, Bushbuck Ridge, Kruger National Park. As a young boy, we used to do hairstyles. There was a thing called perm at the time, and there was a thing called S-Curl. And we used hair care products called Black Like Me. And the bottles were black. At the time, I had no idea who made this Black Like Me stuff, but it was good. You know, we sprayed it around. This was the 80s. You know who made that? Was Herman Mashaba. Here is a man. He works for, okay, number one, he goes to school in the village, very poor, Haramutsi in Hammanskraal, north of Pretoria. And cut a long story short, the details are in the book. He ends up at University of the North, Teflop. And then there is, in his second year, there is a protest. This is during apartheid. The police are called to campus. The university is closed down. He goes home. He never comes back. Second year, right? So he's a dropout. He never set foot at university again, right? And then he is faced with a choice. What do I do with my life? He's a dropout. And then there are 2 options he's entertaining. Option number 1 in the 80s is to join the ANC and go to exile. He did actually entertain that. That was what young black people who were doing at the time. Then he says, no, guns are not my thing. He says, okay, let me find a job. But he had this thing because he was a gambler, by the way, he was a dice thrower in the village. So he had tested a bit of sense. So he wanted money. And he said, you know what, I'm not the kind of a person who must find it, work and so on. I need to make money. So he had this burning for money. He tried this and that. Eventually, he works for a company that sold a hair care product. There was a popular one called, what was it? Super Curl. He's a salesman. He goes to the townships to sell this stuff. He brings loads of money to the company in briefcases in those days. Then he realizes, why am I going to the township to collect money for a white man? This white man gives me the stuff. I go to the township. I bring loads of money to this. Why can't I collect this money for myself? That's where the idea came from. Then the problem is, what are you going to manufacture to collect that kind of money? And he says, black women are buying this stuff. I have to manufacture something similar. But he's not a chemist. He can't mix chemicals. He's just a salesman, very good salesman, by the way, at the time. He then works out a plan. He says, I am going to recruit the chemist who's mixing up this stuff, who is white, who's Afrikaner, Johan Kriel, in 1984, and invite him to partner with me. We set up a company in the township. We produce hair care products. Johan Kriel is a relative of the owner of the company, so that's serious stuff. Anyway, cut a long story short, he recruits Johan Kriel, promises him money. Johan Kriel says, but to set up a factory, you need lots of money. He says, no, leave that to me. He went to the township. There's a guy there who runs filling stations. He convinces this chap to invest 30,000 rands in 1985. Sets up a factory, cut a long story short. He gets married to a young woman, Herman Mashaba. They work together. She was working for a hotel as a bookkeeper. She comes to work with him. Cut a long story short, within a year, literally, they were printing money with this stuff. This is black like me. In 2-3 years, the man was a millionaire. Under apartheid in I'm talking the 1980s. A serious millionaire. Let me give you an example. 1993, he gave the ANC 10 million rand as a donation to conduct voter education. 10 million rand cash from his pocket in 1993. Do you want another anecdote? In 1993, in November, someone touches his factory in the township at night. He rushes there in the morning. The workers are there crying. Everyone is crying. This is November 1993. 2 chaps rock up to cry with him early in the morning. They have heard of this tragedy. You know who are those? Thabo Mbeki. He's there. And Titombo Wayne. In 1993. Why were they there? They knew the kind of contribution he was making to the ANC. So he comes from poverty. He set up his own factory, manufactured stuff, and sold stuff, and became very wealthy and very influential. During the transition, by the way, he would be invited to State House by a pig potter. Before the elections, pig potter experimented, used Herman Mashaba and his wife as guinea pigs, just to see how people are going to deal with this phenomenon of blacks. So they will be invited to the State House and banquets, and people will ask, where did you study? Where do you come from? They were looking at them, and it's strange. Anyway, that's the rest is in the book. So it's truly, that life is truly amazing, the story. And it fits, by the way, into the phenomenon of a few black chaps who actually did well and worked very hard under apartheid, like your Maponya, who actually became very rich during apartheid. Yeah, so let me leave it there. The rest, there's a book out.
It is in the book, yes. I wanted to ask, given his background as a businessman, how does he feel about black economic empowerment policy and about business people like President Cyril Ramaphosa, I suppose, who made a good deal of money by using the mechanisms of black empowerment policy?
He is very, what's the word, bitter about that, by the way. Because, and by the way, he doesn't like Ramaphosa at all. And it's all in the book. He's bitter because he thinks that this group of black businessmen and women are actually not businessmen and women. They haven't started real businesses and produced stuff and sold stuff and worked hard. He thinks that just made easy money. They were invited into boardrooms. And by the way, let me give you another anecdote. I'm not sure if it's in the book, this one. So, Marikana, and this will answer your question. You wrote a biography of Ramaphosa, so you know this stuff more than I do. Cyril Ramaphosa had shares at Lonmin, right? Marikan. I think it's about 9%, if I'm not mistaken. We can find a percentage. That stake, the first person to be invited to be given that stake was Herman Mashaba. Yep. Lonmin invited Herman Mashaba and said, we want you to be a shareholder, we are giving you. So that stake that was given to Cyril Ramaphosa was given to Herman Mashaba. He rejected it. When he looked at the terms, said, keep your money. I don't want that. I'm not going to be part of it. So he believes that a businessman must run real business, number one. Number two, a businessman must be truly independent, must not be controlled. Number three, he believes that a real businessman must invest his or her money in any and every project. And by the way, I write about his culture of savings. He always keeps a stash of money somewhere so that if there's an opportunity, he goes, takes that money, he invests.
Not in a sofa bed.
No, not pala stuff. It's in a bank. Yeah. So he's very bitter about and is by the way, he's very unpopular in those circles. They don't like him for that. It's very critical of PE. But he himself, by the way, did participate in PE deals that he raised money for himself. He doesn't want another person, you invite me and you raise money for me. No, he says, look, I evaluate this stuff. If I'm interested, I am going to raise money and I'll participate as a true businessman. So he's bitter, to cut a long story short.
I wanted to ask about his views on another president, Thabo Mbeki, who Prince knows very well because he used to work for him.
Yes, was a speechwriter.
And I wonder if you could say, you described Mashaba watching the presidency of Thabo Mbeki in disbelief, and that he became deeply disenchanted with Mbeki and with the ANC.
Correct. Look, by the way, he was, in the beginning, supporter number one of the ANC. I mean, the stuff he did, it's unbelievable. I mean, he sponsored the ANC, gave him lots of money. I mean, even Mandela, when he turned 80, he called Herman and said, Herman, look, I'm turning 80. Please organize a party for me. Yes, it happened. He supported Mbeki, by the way. He was very enthused by the African Renaissance debate that Thabo Mbeki was generating and supported that. So he voted the ANCs twice, first under Mandela and secondly under Mbeki. But then he says that he saw a shift on the part of the ANC, led by Mbeki, that made him extremely uncomfortable with the ANC. He cites Zimbabwe, by the way, very bitter about what was happening in Zimbabwe. He feels that the Mbeki should never have, inverted commas, supported ZANU-PF and Mugabe and protected him. He should have been aggressive. Even though when I press him, what form would that aggression take? The details are not clear, but the stance is Mbeki should have been aggressive. The HIV and AIDS stuff. So it's the stuff we know, the mistakes, big mistakes that Mbeki made, that actually made Herman change his views about the ANC. And corruption in the ANC, even under Mbeki, by the way, we remember there were a number of corruption scandals, big corruption scandals. Well, few, but yeah. So it's corruption, it's Zimbabwe, it's HIV and AIDS. And then Zuma was the breaking point. And he said, I'm done with these people. He didn't, and then we can get into detail. And then he decided, what do I do? He said, let me make an example. Let me try and show black people that they must not stick to race when they think of politics. I'm going to join the DA. And I don't want any position, he says. I just want to make a statement. Let me cut it there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that transition. So I think you said he continued to vote for the ANC across the Mbeki period. Perhaps I think you said until...
No. The first term. So that is 1999. 2004, he did not.
Okay. And then after Zuma's come to power, Mashaba becomes active in the Free Market Foundation. So it suggests there's some kind of underlying intellectual foundation for his move towards the DA, because the Free Market Foundation espouses a philosophy of business and an approach to the economy that you don't find in the ANC. And I wondered if you could tell us a bit about his period at the Free Market Foundation and then how he ended up at the DA's door, essentially. How did he decide that the DA was the party that he would join?
Okay, this story of the Free Market Foundation, I actually didn't know before I got into the research. I was surprised myself. That comes a long way, by the way. It comes from the 80s. The CEO, the longest serving CEO of the Free Market Foundation is a man you probably know, Leon Low. Leon Low, in his younger days, is trained as a lawyer. During apartheid, he's a liberal. He used to crisscross black townships, trying to promote entrepreneurship among black people. So when he stumbled into Herman and whatever Herman was doing at the time, he volunteered to be the lawyer for black like me and other businesses in the township. So if they faced any legal something, he would represent them for free, because he had an NGO, obviously, had the backing, financial backing. So they developed a relationship in the 80s with Leon Low, which is why later on, when he was concerned about the mess that the ANC was doing in South Africa, he asked himself, what can I do? Is there something practical I can do to try and halt what the ANC is doing? And his immediate idea, because he's a capitalist, very proud capitalist, so his second book, he calls himself Capitalist Crusader. He said, okay, let me approach my friend Leon. Maybe I can do something in the NGO space. And then he goes to Leon Dev, lunch at some restaurant in Sandton. He says, look, these ANC fellows are messing up, they're destroying our country. I want to do something. And then Leon says, look, at the Free Market Foundation, we are an NGO, we're trying to also to halt the damage. So come over, he invites him, and be a board member, and then we can work together. That's how he ended up at the Free Market Foundation. But then to fast forward, he was chairman of the board, donating good money to the Free Market Foundation. I mean, it's very generous when it comes to when it's committed to a cause. Even, by the way, his party, he is the largest funder of his party. He actually is he is the only leader of the party who does what he does. He funds that party 90%. 90% of Action SA's money, and this is millions. Running a political party is a lot of money. Funds it. So he funded Free Market Foundation. But then at some point he fell. He said, Leon, we are not making an impact in this little NGO of ours because the problems are political and we can't get into that space. And then he said to Leon, I'm going to join a political party. Leon says, well, if you feel strongly about it, you go ahead. That's how he landed up at the DA. And it is not Leon who said, go join the DA. He took the decision himself. Leon was shocked when he said, I'm joining the DA. And how he joined the DA is actually fascinating. He bumped into Mmusi Maimane in 2011. Mmusi Maimane in 2011 was not a leader of the DA. He was a mere councillor in Johannesburg. So a mutual friend, they were at a dinner somewhere in a private house, and then he didn't even know Mmusi Maimane at the time. So this mutual friend introduces Mmusi Maimane. They exchange numbers, but they don't call each other. When he decides to join the DA, he does not even know that there's a thing called the branch of the DA, let alone where this thing is. It does not know where the DA's office. Then he scrolls his phone. There's a young fellow I met back in 2011. Maybe let me call this chap. Calls the chap, says, look, my name is Herman Mashaba. We met. Well, no, I know you, Mr. Mashaba. He says, where do I go to join the DA? Right? Moses says, don't worry, don't go anywhere. You stay in your office. I'll send someone there. And indeed, someone was sent. He paid 10 rand membership fee, and the rest is history.
Now, his rise, once he was in the DA, was quite rapid. In here, you have the very exciting claim, I think, that when Mmusi Maimane became leader of the DA, to the extent that the DA has a leader, it's very difficult to understand the constitution of that party if you look at it closely. You say that Herman Mashaba was offered that job before Maimane. Could you tell us more about that?
This is very interesting, by the way, what you are asking, because if you read, so I know this stuff, by the way, very well. I can put my head on the block. If you want to test my knowledge of this stuff, go and read Helen Zelensky's memoirs, that thick book. Somewhere you will find where she actually explains my involvement in that search of a leader of the DA. But let's park that. Helen is frantically looking for a successor at some point. She's going around shopping, and she's very clear in her mind she's looking for a black successor. She does everything in her party to make sure that everyone is out of her way. This shall happen. The first person earlier someone else they tried. Herman is now member of the DA. And she's thinking, maybe this guy could be leader of the DA. What does she do? She goes to his house and have general discussions just to test the mind of this guy. Discussions about this and that, the world, this and that, just to test where the guy is. She leaves the house. She doesn't say to him, could you please be leader of the DA and succeed me? A few weeks later, she sends Breitenbach, the parliamentarian, the former prosecutor, go to Herman. Breitenbach goes to Herman's house. Breitenbach is not interested in clouds and the sky, goes straight to the point. Could you be the leader of the DA? Herman looks at Breitenbach and says, you must be mad. Me, leader of the DA. I don't know politics. I don't know anyone in the DA. I have no idea. I've not even read by the way, he had not even read the constitution of the DA. I said, I have no idea. Please, don't even entertain that. Right. And she leaves. And then the second was Rampele. That was the second attempt. That's where my involvement is mentioned. And even that, we know how it happened, right? It ended up with a kiss and that, yeah. And then the third option, when there was no time at all, was Mmusi Maimane. That's how Mmusi Maimane became president, leader of the DA. Anyway, the rest is in the book.
Now, you've explained that this suggestion was made and he wasn't interested in being leader. But then, just a couple of years later, he accepts the invitation to be the mayor of Johannesburg. So why do you think he accepted that invitation?
Another fascinating episode. Again, it's in the book, and I mention names. So, and these things happen. It's, whether they like it or they don't like it, it's in the book. They send emissaries to him and say, how about being mayor of Johannesburg on behalf of the DA? And the guy looks at them and says, nah, man, you must be joking. I don't know politics, mayor. I don't even know. By the way, he didn't even know where the office of the mayor was, number one. Number two, he didn't even know what a mayor does when a mayor wakes up in the morning. He didn't know that. He had no clue. And then the last person to convince him was a man called Mike Moriarty. He was a good friend of mine. Very smooth operator. Operates in Joburg. Eventually, Mike, they all go to his house. Mike convinced him. Before he accepted, by the way, he said to them, look, I'll help you to find a mayor. They say, who? he says, don't worry, I'll come back to you with a name. He flies to the US to look for a mayor for the DA. And he meets this lady in the US, convinces this lady, please stand for the DA in Johannesburg. And do you know who that is? Lindiwe Mazibuko was in the US at the time. And she said to him, over my dead body. And he flies back to South Africa, disappointed. And eventually, Mike Moriarty convinces him to stand as the DA's mayoral candidate. Should I say the rest is history? Or is in the book?
The rest is in the book.
That's how he accepted. You said, why? Look, there was too much pressure on him from the DA. They were disparate. They were literally disparate. There was a man who had raised his hand. They actually didn't like that man. And the man had been in the DA far longer than Musi. They actually did not want that guy to be mayor. His name is Rabelani Dagada, with a PhD, by the way. He was once an academic at Wits. They didn't want him. So they were disparate. And then they assured him, says, I know nothing about this stuff. They said, don't worry, we will give you the best support in the world. He says, well, if you say so, let's give it a shot.
A lot of the book, you may not have noticed this, Prince. A lot of the book is about Johannesburg. And it seems to me that Mashaba loves Johannesburg. It's his place, as do you. And in fact, so does our president, Cyril Ramaphosa. So you may not have noticed how much you write about Johannesburg. Is that a correct characterization of Mashaba, that Johannesburg is at the center of his political vision and his life, that he loves the city, it's the city in which he's worked and lived? Or does he have a broader conception of politics across the country as a whole?
Look, his mission, he says, is to save South Africa. That's what he says. But South Africa, South Africa. But if you get closer to him, you can see the man is obsessed and passionate about Johannesburg. I saw it very early. Even with this politics, I mean, a lot of the stuff you hear or you read about or you see on TV, it's about the coalition politics in Johannesburg. He over-invests in Johannesburg. And I think it makes sense because, I mean, he was born in a rural area in Pretoria, Hammanskraal. But when his factory was torched in 1993, he rebuilt it in Johannesburg, in Midrand. And after that, he actually lived in Johannesburg since then. He never went back to Pretoria. So he got so attached and has done a lot of business around Johannesburg. And by the way, he has withdrawn. His wife is running their businesses. But the man is so diversified. But the headquarters of his business activities are in Johannesburg. So yes, he is spiritually attached to Johannesburg. That's what I picked up. But also, when I was following him and writing this thing, remember when I began this project, he was mayor of Johannesburg. So because I wanted to understand his mind and how he operates in politics, I had to focus on what he was doing while in office in Johannesburg, because that gave me an idea of the kind of character I'm dealing with. So I am aware, by the way, about that there's even a chapter about Johannesburg. There's also a chapter about Pretoria. So it was informed by the life of my subject. So if I wrote about you, I certainly would have had a chapter about Cape Town. So sorry, man. Next time.
Now, how does he fall out with the DA, and how does he lose his position as mayor of Johannesburg and then leave the party?
Fascinating stuff. I mean, really, really fascinating. So remember, when I began this project so I approached him in 2018. I had no idea that there was going to be a fallout. There were no major problems at the time, by the way. So I was seeing this chap's highway in the DA. And boom, in the middle of my project, The whole thing is falling apart. You can imagine. He was worried and troubled. I was excited as a writer. This thing is now taking a twist that I never even foresaw. He becomes mayor of Johannesburg. He immediately realizes that his party, the DA, doesn't support him. Immediately, he can sense, he can feel it in his bones, that the party that invited me to be their mayor actually does not support me. Let me give you the details are just an anecdote. His first public consultation, because if to pass a budget, there's a thing called integrated development plan, you must go to the communities to present the stuff. So he goes to the communities. And the ANC had vowed to make his life, in fact, they thought that they had a plan that this coalition government, his coalition government, was going to collapse in, they said 4 months longest. So they really set up a trap and say, we are going to teach this fellow politics, doesn't know politics. First public meeting, it was somewhere in Midrand. They organized thugs, literal to assault him. So he walks into this hall, right? He is not even aware of this thing. And as the meeting progresses, chaos breaks out. The Metro Police, this is a few days in office, the Metro Police is not defending him. They're still loyal to the ANC. And he was so shocked. He saw the EFF, his first meeting, they went for the ANC. There was blood in that meeting. The EFF going for the ANC thugs. There was a big fight. The EFF defending the mayor of the DA. The DA was nowhere to be found. In fact, the DA actually didn't go with him in public meetings. Surprisingly, I followed him, so I know what I'm talking about. I have been to these meetings and watched. And it intrigued me. Why is the DA, this is the mayor of the DA, he goes to these public meetings, they are not there. Why? Especially in black communities. It intrigued me. Anyway, from that moment on, the EFF served as his intelligence operatives. Whenever he went to black communities, they would actually tell him what the ANC is plotting to do, and they would send their ground forces to make sure that the ANC does not disrupt the public meetings. And then the DA drifted, him and the DA drifted apart. And the complaint was he was not paying attention to the DA's constituents. He was paying attention to the EFF's constituents. It got to a point where the EFF openly called him our mayor. I mean, these words are words used by Julius Malema, who, by the way, ironically did not want him to be mayor of Johannesburg. So he lost the DA because there was a feeling on the part of the leadership of the DA that he had shifted from the DA's constituency to the EFF's constituency. The last anecdote, somewhere in Randbeck in Johannesburg, in an old age home, white facility. He's addressing this before the this crowd before the 2019 elections, convincing these people to vote for his party, the DA. And obviously there was this complaint about him not paying attention to the traditional DA constituents. He asked the crowd, he says, if you were a mayor and you had a choice, you don't have enough resources to cut grass in the suburbs where I live, he says, or to give toilets to black people who live in informal settlements who don't have a toilet, what would you do? He asked a DA constituents. And there were mamas in the room, toilets. Yes. The rest is in the book.
In the book, you quote Mashaba as saying about Zille and Zille's rise to be the power behind the throne, I suppose, on the departure of Mmusi Maimane and James Self. That Mashaba says, if she's in, I'm out. Can you explain the nature of that relationship between Mashaba and Helen Zille and why he was so determined to leave if she was elected?
So around the time, just before Mashaba left the DA, Helen Zille was no longer leader of the DA. She had reinvented herself. She was now a senior research fellow at the Institute of Race Relations.
I should just tell you something here, Prince, that I met Helen while she was allegedly retired from politics up the coast somewhere north of Big Bay. It was pouring with rain, and we met in a cafe. And I knew her husband, who used to be in the office next to me at UCT, and he was going crazy having Helen at home. So they love each other, but she was impossible when she wasn't working full time. That her approach to work was to get up at 4 in the morning and prepare for the day ahead, and then work throughout the day. Yeah. And so when she retired, she was absolutely impossible to live with, and she very quickly came back, and she's to some extent a polarizing figure within the DA as well. So I wanted to hear more about their personal relationship and the way in which they interacted with one another.
Look, to be honest, they never had any personal relationship. They didn't. And Herman didn't have any personal relationship with any senior leader of the DA. So it was a complete outsider, and I do write about it, the disadvantages and the advantages of a character like that, who come from outside. But Helen, given Herman's stature in society and so on, felt at some point, as I explained, that possibly, maybe this guy, right? And the rest is in the book. Helen now joins the Institute of Race Relations. She's no longer leader, but she's actually involved in maneuverings within the DA through the Institute of Race Relations. You begin to pick up noises from the Institute of Race Relations in terms of who should be the leader of the DA. At some point, by the way, they were punting Alan Windy. At some point, Helen, and there was a young researcher there by the surname of Pretorius, with whom I debated at some point, who is now this terrier championing this thing. But you can see there's a big political hand there going on. Herman is aware of those shenanigans, that Helen Zille is engineering something in the DA. But this something involves getting rid of Musima Imane, number one. It's a major plan. Get rid of this chap. Also getting rid of Herman as a mayor of Johannesburg. And by the way, recently, Helen did publicly admit that there was a plan to remove Herman. The DA was going to vote with the ANC to remove Herman as mayor of Johannesburg. This is public. I can find it. It's actually, can Google and find it. Right? So Herman is aware of what Helen is doing. And then fast forward a few months down the road, she raises up her hand now. So she's no longer a senior research fellow. She's back into politics. She wants to be chairperson of the Federal Council, right? Herman says, if she's in, given what I know, I'm out. That's the background. Nothing personal, but political.
Okay. So Herman has been rather successful at getting his own party off the ground, although contesting primarily in Gauteng. But I believe the party is going to contest nationally in these elections next year. I think he said in every province they're going to run for office. Do you think that the prospects of the party under Herman's leadership are really strong, or do you think that he lacks recognition outside Gauteng, and that the party may, like other smaller parties, fade away?
Yeah, I can assure you the party won't do well here in the Western Cape. Forget that. Yeah. I think the best poll, so I read these polls by Paul Stars. The best poll, it's actually an election. If you want to test the performance of a party, don't listen to people who are called experts like me. Listen to the voice of the voters. Look at how the voters have voted for that party after an election. That's the best. It's conclusive. You can debate and they have voted. So the best poll in terms of if you want to gauge the performance of Action SA is their performance in the 2021 elections. And you are right, they actually contested in 6 municipalities, 3 in Gauteng, and 3 in KwaZulu-Natal. They did badly in KwaZulu-Natal. They did fairly well in Gauteng. And their best performance was in Johannesburg, where Herman is based. There, they got 16%, overtaking the EFF. They became the 3rd largest party in council. I mean, you launch a party in 2020 online, the first party to be launched online. You didn't even hire a single taxi to transport anybody anywhere. You just stood in front of a camera and say, hi, my name is Herman Mashaba, I'm launching a party, accompanied by your wife and your children. And then exactly a year later, this was August 2020. In August 2021, you contest. You get 16% of Johannesburg. That's not small, by the way, politically. It's not small. So a party like that, you have to take very seriously. Just by participating in 6 municipalities, South Africa has 270-something municipalities. So they participate in 6 municipalities. They become South Africa's 6th largest political party. 6 municipalities. Right? That tells you that there's something in there. Now, the prospects next year. Obviously, I'm not a Sangoma. If I was a Sangoma, I'd throw bones. So I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So, but my sense is that Action SA is likely to sit somewhere between 6% and 10% in that space. That's I don't think they'll cross 10%. Where will the numbers come from, in my view? Remember, Gauteng is the biggest province in South Africa in terms of population, 16 million human beings, South Africans. Most people actually, they underestimate Gauteng because it's the smallest in terms of land size. And that's where Action SA shows a potential of support. Let me give you an example. So, 2021, Action SA gets 20% of Soweto. The only party after 1994 to register that. The ANC has always been getting 90%, the entire Soweto. The DA has never gotten 20%. The EFF never. But Action SA did get 20% of Soweto. It also got 20% of white suburbia in Johannesburg, which has been the traditional support base of the DA. Which is why, by the way, the DA is very worried about Herman Mashaba's party. Because his party also takes from the DA, but it also takes from the ANC. So my sense is that they will get something. They will send a sizable contingent down here in Parliament. And if the ANC were to get less than 40% and the EFF were to get less than 10%, they could actually be a major player in the coalition negotiations. And this scenario is not far-fetched, by the way, if you look at the numbers, and I've looked at the numbers. Take KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, for example. The ANC came 2021 elections. Why the ANC hit 46% at the national level is because of 2 provinces. KZN, the ANC declined from 56% to 41%. In Gauteng, from 44% to about 36%. Then it brought the ANC below 50%. So if you were to have a scenario where the IFP performs well in Gauteng, in KZN, the DA also does well. The DA should do well if that were to happen. And Action SA does well. quite possibly you could have these three parties around the same and other smaller parties, obviously. So I can't tell you exactly the numbers. I'm not a Sangoma. I'm very sorry. Became an academic.
Thank you, Prince. I think that given that we have such an intelligent-looking audience today, that we should hand over to you to ask Prince some questions about the outsider and about the book that Prince has written on him. So, would anybody like to begin with a question? Lady here. Oh, I think the microphone has gone to someone at the back first, and please go ahead. It's fine.
Hi, Prince. So I believe the reason why Herman doesn't do well, perhaps his political position needs to be revisited. You know, he believes in bringing the left and the right wing together so that there's neutrality for reconciliation purposes. And where the country is right now, reconciliation is probably something that we will not experience for a very long time. I think I'm still of the younger age. I look at social media. His following is very low in comparison with the EFF that has got over 2 million action essays, just over 100K followers. And it brings me back to your point, because one of your areas of specialization is around political philosophy. Now, in the 80s, early 90s, the late Jakes Gerwel, you know, they believed in the possibility of a multi-party democracy. Now, instead of this coalition, don't you think that Herman is possibly the kind of figure that could lead us into almost reliving that dream of working towards a multi-party democracy? Because what you see politicians are doing, I mean, why did he fail at the DA, as a DA leader? He was just used. They were looking for a black person, it failed, and that's why there was never a personal relationship. So my question to you is, where are we, in terms of the political space, where are we, and how do you see a Herman maybe playing a role in moving us closer to that? Because if you look at the unemployment rate, it's the generation that is desperate for that political change. And perhaps that multi-party democracy is something that a Herman could be an important figure that could drive us into that direction.
Yeah, very interesting and question. Oh,
No, go ahead.
okay. Look, there is. I've been a student of what I would call the political character of South African society. This thing I'm trying, it's elusive. I've been chasing it for years. And I don't have a final answer on it, but there are elements I can already see. One, and South African society embraces inclusion as compared to, or as opposed to, exclusion. And given our history, we may say, but how can you make such a claim of apartheid and all of that? We know that. Just look at what made the ANC to be the most popular party among black people. It is because the ANC was the earliest party to embrace inclusion. If you look at all the black parties that says we are for black people, even during apartheid, black people didn't support such parties. They did not. PAC, none. Azapo, none. All the parties that said we are for black people, and they are passionate and radical, black people have distanced themselves from those parties. And it is the strategic mistake that is being committed, and I watch it, you don't understand, by the EFF. Yeah. They will not grow precisely because they have not understood the character, the political character of South African society. So that's first observation. Second observation is you must be very careful about Twitter following. Because if you take the numbers that I gave you about Johannesburg, right, you would have expected that the EFF, given the 2 million, right, of supporters on Twitter, would have been the biggest party compared to Action SA. But no, they are not. Secondly, or the third point, is that you've got to understand the constituency of the EFF. And I'm going to be brutally honest. And I hope I've been honest in the book. The constituency of the EFF in the main is young, black, uneducated, unemployed, living in informal settlements. Just go look at the numbers and see where the votes of the EFF come from. In the main, they come from Gauteng. But even in Gauteng, they come from particular areas. Your deep sleuths of this world. It's not Soweto. It's not the middle class. Someone who has a house, children, they want their children to do well and all of that. Herman is eating into that space. And by the way, that space is actually the biggest component of South African society. People actually don't know. So if you look at that, you can see that the trajectory says the Action SA is at some point going to overtake the EFF. Now, reconciliation. The DA, by the way, now I was talking black politics. Let me come to white politics. The DA is now the largest party among whites. It was not always the case. It was, I mean, if you look at how that whole thing was formed from the amalgamations that we know about. Why is it? The most radical party on the part of whites in defense of white interests, radically, is the Freedom Front Plus. But the majority of Afrikaners are not voting for the Freedom Front Plus. Why? They are voting for the DA. Because even as they vote for a white party, their sense is that this white party, the DA, is actually more on the side of inclusion as compared to the Freedom Front Plus. Don't worry about the noises of young radical days, but you've got to pay attention to the character of our society. I think the majority of South Africans want reconciliation. And Herman Mashaba, that's the space that he's trying to enter. Will he succeed? I don't know.
Thank you, Prince. We have one more question here.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Most interesting talk. Very privileged to be here. So what concerns me is that you stressed the figures of voting and to have a look at that. I have a view on that, just a personal view that I don't think that the figures necessarily reflect really what's going on ground level. I am a white person that works in an environment on a lower level where I am the only white person in my company working with black, Muslim and colored people and other people from under races and other countries as well. And all I hear all the time is, I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to vote. This is nonsense. I'm not going to vote. The ANC is not going to do anything for me. I don't hear that they say, okay, maybe I'm going to switch to the DA. And it's also not my place to say, but do you think to go to the DA? So when the ANC get very good figures in certain areas, and this is a bold statement, is that I think because at the right time they go there, the people are not educated, not because of anything that they're stupid or don't have the intelligence. They simply don't have the opportunity, or they are farmers and they're happy to do that, and that's good, and that's what we need. We do not have to change that. They get a T-shirt, a cap, and a nice parcel, and it's from the ANC, and the year they have to go on the 16th of March, blah, 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 3 o'clock, there will be a bus. They go to the voting station. It's explained to them correctly where to vote and for who to vote. So I just wonder sometimes if these figures in certain areas are really, really reflecting that is honestly what the people feel they're voting for, if they know what they're voting for.
Okay, thank you for that. Short answer, please,
sure.
Prince, because we're short of
Yeah,
time.
and this, by the way, is a very complicated. We can have a lecture at UCT. You see, I always, to understand South African politics, you must sometimes get out and look at the world. Because if you don't, you are going to arrive at wrong conclusions about politics in general and in particular South African politics. So if you characterize, for example, you were to characterize the voter of the ANC as uneducated, which is correct, poor, which is correct, black, which is correct, and so, and then you say, because of that, you then say, maybe this person is not intelligent. You could make an argument like that. Yeah, you could. You would struggle to explain those who vote for Donald Trump in the US. You would struggle to explain those who vote for Donald Trump in the US. You would struggle to explain those who vote for right-wing parties in France, for example. This lady, what's her name?
Le Pen.
Le Pen, right? Who are educated, who are not given buses or they're not loaded onto buses, but they do vote in a particular way. So that's the first thing. The last point, the short answer, is this. Numbers matter. We hear a lot of noises on Twitter. I hear that. But at the end of the day, it is numbers. You know what numbers are telling me now? Is that the IFP is growing exponentially in KZN. The ANC is declining seriously in KZN. By-election after by-election, go and check. Numbers matter. And these numbers, by the way, tell me a story about the ANC. They tell me a story about the DA. They tell me a story about the EFF. They also tell me a story about Action SA. So I'm afraid, as a political scientist, I cannot ignore numbers, even though I hear the noises. But at the end of the day, numbers tell me, I think, a much more reliable story. The last point, sorry, I said last, is that South Africa's population, by the way, 60% of it lives in urban and peri-urban areas. So the ANC stronghold, as we speak, the ANC is a rural party now, becoming extremely becoming unpopular in urban spaces. That's how you explain the local government election results that we saw. So the ANC will continue to dominate the Eastern Cape, Limpopo, Mpumalanga. Even there, by the way, it is declining. But let me tell you, Gauteng, the urban centers, the ANC is declining. So anyway, that's my analysis. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Prince.
The rest is in the book.
So on that point, first of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming and for listening so attentively to Prince's wisdom. Prince will be performing as a celebrity author after this. He'll be over there at the book table. If you want to have a copy of Prince's book, I'm sure he's also willing to answer any additional questions you may have and to sign your copy of the book. So thank you very much, Prince, and thank you to all of you for coming today.
Thank you, Anton, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen.